They're persisting through Wednesday, but the rain stalls across central belts into central parts of Scotland. A lot of cloud there for parts of Aberdeenshire, keeping things cool, whilst slow-moving showers affect Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, northern England, with fast-moving showers further south on a brisk breeze. 22 Celsius in London. Away from the showers, it will feel still relatively warm, but a cool day to come for the northeast, with low teens more likely. And then the cloud and some outbreaks of rain continue across North Wales, northern England, into parts of western and southwestern Scotland overnight. Further south, some clear spells, but for the vast majority, those temperatures will stay up in the double figures as we begin Thursday. A cloudy start for many, a lot of low cloud lurking around these North Sea coasts, but bright conditions for the south, at least during the morning, before another band of cloud and rain pushes into Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest by the afternoon. 1 or 2 showers elsewhere, and behind the rain in the west, the weather turns increasingly windy later Thursday and into much of Friday and Saturday.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton tonight. 24 hours have passed since Boris Johnson defeated Tory rebels and won the confidence vote. But the fight back against the Brexit-hating Liberal elite is far from over. I'll explain why in my digest next. Then my superstar panel will weigh in. Tonight I'm joined by former Daily Star editor Dawn Neeson, Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. In an interview with the Beeb earlier today, Tory Red Wall hero Lee Anderson didn't pull any punches as he boldly called the Boris-bashing corporation out for its relentless bias.
A man who's lied to the Queen, lied to the House of Commons, lied to the public, and they don't trust him
what people
anymore.
see, Geeta, is a witch hunt led by the BBC, led by the Labour Party and the mainstream.
Well, listen to me.
But is he right that the mainstream media are on a witch hunt against the Prime Minister? I'll get your opinion on that in The Clash at 9:25, but not before Lee himself joins me to argue his case. He'll go up against the broadcaster Nina Mishkov and former BBC journalist and author of The Noble Liar, Robin Aitken. What can Boris Johnson do to win back the support of his party and, most importantly, the electorate? Well, political analyst and best-selling author Matt Goodwin wants the PM to launch a policy shake-up. He'll break down his master plan for the PM at 9:40. Is it the Tories' 2 years of lockdown hell? That's damned us to economic calamity and tax raises. Well, senior Tory MP, former Chief Whip and the chair of the COVID recovery group, Mark Harper, was one of the biggest opponents of shutting down the country. He's next to give evidence in my lockdown inquiry. That's at 10:15. Is it really necessary for the NHS to add the COVID-19 vaccine to its standard list of childhood jabs? We'll debate at 10. Plus, are we doing enough to scrutinise the globalist agenda being pushed by the World Health Organization? As a chief correspondent for Rebel News, Avi Yemini is the man helping to hold them to account.
Will always be points where we say we should have done different. This has been so horrible, and by the way, the pandemic's not finished. It's still going on.
So those words will scare people because they're thinking we're just getting back to life, and you're telling us from the WHO it's not over.
I'll sit down with him uncancelled at 10:40. Now, Gareth Southgate says that by taking the knee, his England players are, quote, educating fans who have inherited thinking. So are those like me who criticise the BLM movement and its empty gesture, therefore just stupid? Coronation Street actor Charlie Lawson, he's not happy with the Three Lions manager, and he'll reveal all in tonight's Outsider at 9:50. As Keir Starmer says the vast majority of women don't have a penis, is women's sport at risk after two trans women win a major cycling race? Plus, I've got to admit, I've not read a single word of Harry Potter, but I'm pretty sure England hating was never a lesson taught at Hogwarts.
If we're being honest, though, the thing that made my job easiest is just being English. This is the universally recognised accent of pure evil.
Is it, Daniel? I'll give you the full lowdown on that from Mr. Radcliffe and our Media Buzz at 10:30. You'll also get a first look at tomorrow's newspapers as they drop. And as ever, I'll crown a brand new Greatest Britain and Union Jackass before the night is out. This is Dan Wootton Tonight. Let's go. Just one thing first, though. The haters and wreckers of the RMT Rail Union are planning ultimate chaos and carnage for the UK, with 3 days of strike action across the railway network announced for later this month. Over 50,000 rail workers will stage walkouts on the 21st, 23rd and 25th of June. It's planned to be the biggest dispute to hit the rail network since 1989 when, what a surprise, Margaret Thatcher was in power. Well, I say Boris Johnson must stare down these dangerous unions, just like the Iron Lady. The actions of RMT General Secretary Mick Lynch are despicable. My digest on the Boris fight back in just a moment. Then my superstar panel will weigh in. Tonight, former editor, current columnist at the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, the Conservative commentator, Calvin Robinson, and the author and journalist, Rebecca Reid. But before all of that, the news headlines at 9 with Miranda Shunka.
Thanks, Dan. Good evening. The top stories from the GB newsroom. Glastonbury Festival is among the events likely to be affected by a 3-day national rail strike. Tens of thousands of workers are taking part in the biggest walkout on the network in over 3 decades. The RMT union says the industrial action will take place on the 21st, 23rd and 25th of June. It's after unions and rail bosses failed to reach an agreement in a row over pay freezes and job cuts. Well, Rail Delivery Group Chairman Steve Montgomery is hoping talks will resume ahead of the strike.
Obviously, we're extremely disappointed with the announcement from RMT. There's clearly striking. No one wins out of striking. So it's really important we ask RMT to get back round the table.
Boris Johnson's promise to cut taxes and reduce the cost of government. The Prime Minister is asking his cabinet to find ways to cut costs to the public and business in an effort to try and boost the economy. The PM thanked his ministers for their support after he saw off a vote of confidence in his leadership last night. But Mr Johnson has been left bruised after 41% of his party didn't back him. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says it's now time for them to get behind the Prime Minister.
Well, we had a vote yesterday. The Prime Minister won a clear majority. It's time to draw a line, move forward and focus on what people want us to be talking about: housing, childcare, delivering on lower taxes.
From tomorrow, doctors will legally have to notify the authorities if they suspect a patient is suffering from monkeypox. It's after the UK Health Security Agency declared the virus a notifiable disease. Efforts are underway to stop the spread as more than 300 cases are confirmed in the UK. A man described by prosecutors as the biggest Nazi of the lot has been jailed for 8.5 years. Alex Davis was found guilty last month of being a member of the banned far-right group National Action. He co-founded the neo-Nazi organisation while he was a student at Warwick University in 2013. And nearly 1 in 6 people in the UK are now using food banks. Research by the Food Standards Agency says 3/4 of the population say the cost of food is a major future concern. More than a fifth of those surveyed in March say they're skipping meals to save money. Well, on TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Dan Wootton tonight.
So the fight back begun today, but it needs to get stronger and louder. The Boris-hating, Brexit-despising Liberal elite have failed in their quest to depose a Prime Minister elected in a landslide just 3 years ago. And now some of Boris Johnson's allies, some of them have rightly started to target the media organisations in this country who have been quite clearly in the tank for the Labour SNP Lib Dem Green coalition from hell. First up, the Boris-bashing corporation, otherwise known as the BBC. Red Wall battler Lee Anderson wasn't having any of it when their clearly biased presenter Geeta Gurumurthy made a string of claims about Boris Johnson during this live encounter at 10:07 this morning.
A man who's lied to the Queen, lied to the House of Commons, lied to the public, and they don't trust him anymore.
What people see, Geeta, is a witch hunt led by the BBC, led by the Labour Party and the mainstream.
It's the Conservative MPs who voted, not any of the media.
Had it in for Boris from day one. It's been a massive witch hunt. It's about time you got off his back. Let him crack on and run the country. Come back and talk to me in 2 years' time when he's delivered on his promises, and then we'll see where we are.
There is no witch hunt, I can assure you, from the BBC or any of...
My inbox is full of people complaining about the BBC all the time, saying it should be defunded. It's a massive witch hunt by you and the Labour Party and the mainstream media. You're on his case all the time. Even now, you're not going to let this drop, are you? You're going to go on and on and on.
And he is right. The BBC, along with the equally biased Sly News, ITV News and Channel 4 News, have spent 7 months telling their millions of viewers that the most important story in the world, the whole world, is whether Boris Johnson was presented with a birthday cake in 2020. But when slippery Starmer, their beloved Labour leader, was caught red-handed breaking lockdown laws far more egregiously, they decided to ignore it. Lee wasn't the only Tory MP fighting back, though. Look at this delicious moment from the BBC's left-wing show Newsnight last night when Tory MP Adam Holloway confronted the presenter Mark Urban about the programme's bias live on air.
He was not hanging out with his mates. He was hanging out with civil servants, many of whom didn't vote for him.
But you admit the damage, though, to his reputation.
I think there's great damage to the reputation of politics. And I think it's also, at some point, it should do great damage to organisations like the BBC. I mean, this programme that I'm on now was showing pictures of him looking like Hannibal Lecter at the beginning.
Oh, come on.
OK, I can show you right here. Look at that. You've got razor blades. I mean, does that guy look like somebody who's been given a birthday cake, or someone who's just been locked up for something at the Old Bailey? I mean, this thing has been blown totally out of proportion.
All right, let's come back to John Barron.
We should be thanking this man.
He was cut off soon, wasn't he? As soon as he produced the receipts. The left-wing humiliation didn't end there, though. Do you remember the outrage and mockery last night when the Education Secretary Nadeem Zahawi said Volodymyr Zelensky would be, quote, punching the air at the vote of confidence in Boris Johnson? Well, the Guido Fort website pulled together the best of the outrage, which includes Scotland editor of The Spectator, Alex Massey, who tweeted that Zelensky wants Boris to stay stuff as peddled by Zahawi on Sky Now is utterly contemptible, utterly loathsome. Then you had Times columnist Harry Wallop, who tweeted, "What do you think President Zelensky is doing tonight? He's punching the air because his great ally Boris Johnson has won. Desperate, desperate stuff." From Nadeem Zahawi. The idea that Zelensky, on a day when bombs have started raining down once again on Kyiv, has given a moment's thought to Boris Johnson surviving a vote by a narrow margin is fanciful stuff. And then there was Daily Mirror deputy political editor Ben Glaze, who sneered, "Yep, the president of a country literally fighting an existential war against a nuclear-armed invader is hanging on for the result of the Tory no-confidence vote. Presumably now Boris is safe for the night, Zelensky is going to switch over for Love Island." Well, you're all wrong. Actually, they are all wrong. Zelensky was punching the air, and he acknowledged as much during this intervention earlier today.
Boris is supporting us. Boris is very concrete in supporting Ukraine. I do not know who was responsible for this decision yesterday, but I'm glad that we have not lost a very important ally. This is great news. This is all I can say.
So there you go. It wasn't Tory spin. Boris, meanwhile, tried to reset at the start of today's Cabinet meeting. Look.
Morning, Cabinet. Thank you all very much, and very good to see you all. And I think, thank you, by the way, for everybody for all your good work yesterday, because which was a very important day, because we're able now to draw a line under the issues that our opponents want to talk about, and we're able to get on with talking about what I think the people of this country want us to talk about, which is what we are doing to help them and to take the country forward.
So the good news is Boris survived, but it is going to need much more than just rhetoric to save this government. Boris must return to core Conservative policies, especially when it comes to tax. I wanted to share what Lord Frost has said about this. Lord Frost would be a very good Prime Minister, let's be honest, said if the PM is to save his premiership and his government, he should now take a different course. Bring taxes down straight away to tackle the cost of living crisis, take on public service reform and establish an affordable and reliable energy policy for the long term. I'm well aware Boris has been far from perfect, but he didn't really have a hope of success with the campaigning BBC and most of the rest of the mainstream media out to get him. Did he? To respond now, my superstar panel. Former editor, current columnist at the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, the Conservative commentator, Calvin Robinson, and the author and journalist, Rebecca Reid. Calvin Robinson, it's been great, I think, to see these Tory MPs being brave enough to stand up to a lot of the media in this country, which has been corrupt, which has been biased, because the reason they so often don't, Calvin, is because they're so scared of the power of an organisation like the BBC. But Lee Anderson, he don't give a damn.
He does not. It's great to see him just speaking common sense. He's from the same neck of the woods as me, actually. I think he grew up with my father. But what he said is spot on. The BBC, the mainstream media, the Labour Party, but not just them. The Ramonas from within the Conservative Party are the ones targeting Boris Johnson. I think a lot of this does have to do with Brexit.
Absolutely.
We saw Lord Adonis said, when Boris is gone, Brexit's undone. And I think that's the reason they're stabbing him in the back or in the front.
And it completely is. Dawn Neeson, I thought the intervention from Zelensky was really significant today because, look, whether you think that it matters or not, the left have tried to paint a picture of this as some sort of Tory fantasy. Whereas actually Zelensky does view Boris Johnson as his...
No, I thought it was very interesting. And all the sneering, as if Zelensky would bother doing that. Well, yes, he does care, because we have been the biggest supporter of Ukraine and the fight against the Russians. And Boris is really... And Boris is a hero over there. But they can't accept that either, can they? By the way, I'm not the biggest Boris fan in the world.
No,
but he is a hero over there. And the fact that everyone's sneering at his efforts to help the people of Ukraine, I find very upsetting for a start.
I know you've been very critical of Boris, but do you think it was right for him to survive the confidence vote in this context?
Yes, I do. And part of me is pleased, Dan, because after the lovely weekend we've all had, where it was just a nice feeling for once, we felt,
unified.
It's like 2012 again.
It was lovely. And then suddenly...
the rebels blew it up.
Yeah, and then suddenly, within hours, we were back to square one with the division and the hatred and everyone screaming at one another. So a part of me was pleased because I'm personally finding it exhausting. I just want now for the key issues that we're all facing to be looked at. I want the two parties to stop behaving like children in a playground and sort out what's really important. It's, get back to being the Tories. That's what Boris needs to do. Taxes, cost of living...
Energy, bring down taxes, our energy, but also immigration finally needs to be addressed.
But while this lot are screaming at each other like kids, we're the ones that are all suffering.
Rebecca Reid, you had called on Boris Johnson to resign. Do you
well, I
still
said
think
he was
should?
I said on New Year's Eve here that he was going to go this year. And I really
still might be right.
Well, I just like being right. So ideally, that's the main reason I want him to go. So fingers crossed, Boris, if you could, just before the end of December, so that I can be right. Do I think he should go?
Have you changed your mind?
I think it depends what he does next. If I were him, I would be trying to... There's an episode of The Thick of It where they have to come up with something to announce that day. And that's effectively what he needs to do. He needs to get some people in a room and be like, right, what's not going to break the bank that will be generally popular? 2 or 3 small things. Make a childcare a little bit more affordable for slightly more people. A bank holiday in a couple of years' time. Those kinds of things.
Basically, a whole load of Labour socialist-type policies.
That aren't going to cost very much
Labour
money.
light.
Some easy wins that people like. But what has he done that everyone's gone, oh, actually, that sounds quite good?
Well, he's done a lot of handouts. What he hasn't done, Calvin, is cut tax, which was a key part of the Tory manifesto.
Which is what we voted for.
And if he turned around and said, actually, I'm just going to scrap the net zero policies, he wouldn't have to introduce anything new, just scrap the green stuff.
Yeah, I don't know, because I think there are a lot of people who, I think more people than you think would be really frustrated by that.
I think Carrie Johnson would be.
I mean, it's a fair point. The only thing I would...
Scrap the green levies and I would say take on something more cautious.
But then about that whole fiery, planety dying thing
But it's not happening next week.
I mean, I think climate change is real, Calvin, and I'm a bit worried. I'm not that worried about it. Like, occasionally I don't do the best recycling, but I'm a bit worried.
Actually, Rebecca, it would reduce their fuel bills at least. We wouldn't have to put the heating on.
It's a bit like when Donald Trump said, inject yourself with bleach and you won't have COVID. It's true, you just won't have anything else, like a heartbeat.
That's fine.
But
I want to
celebrate that we avoided a Jeremy Hunt government, because that
This is true. This is true. That would have been very annoying.
Just
wash your mouth out. Bad day.
I'm not confident enough yet to say that we have avoided it.
Don't say
that.
know,
I think this is really serious.
Petrifying.
I think it is petrifying. But you've got to look at the establishment that wants Jeremy Hunt in as Prime Minister. You've got to look at the globalist organisations that wants Jeremy Hunt in as Prime Minister, World Health Organisation, all of those.
Who would you rather China? If you had to pick somebody currently, who would you have instead?
This is the big problem. I couldn't pick another minister to replace Boris Johnson, which is why he is the least worst situation.
Yeah, and that matters.
When people start saying Tom Tugendhat, that's when you know that there aren't any exciting options.
Jeremy Hunt is literally Cockney rhyming slang. Sorry, no way.
Dawn Neeson, Calvin Robinson, Rebecca Reid, my superstar panel there with me all night. But coming up, what should Boris do now to rescue his premiership from its perilous position? Well, political analyst Professor Matthew Goodwin is calling on the PM to have a proper policy shake-up. He reveals his action plan at 9:40. But next in the clash, after Red Wall hero Lee Anderson bashed the Beeb, as we saw over their bias of Boris, I ask, is the mainstream media on a witch hunt against the Prime Minister? Well, the man himself, that's Lee, not Bojo, battles it out with broadcaster Nina Mishkov and former BBC journalist and author of The Noble Liar, Robin Aiken. As ever, though, your voice, most important on this show. What do you think? Did you agree with Lee Anderson's intervention today? Is the BBC pursuing a witch hunt against Boris? Dan at gbnews.uk. Tweet me at gbnews. We've got our poll running there. Vote now. The results after the break.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Rain overnight will be followed by showers on Wednesday, but always staying fine in the far north of Scotland. That's where a ridge of high pressure keeps things settled, but elsewhere, a lot of low pressure lurking nearby. One system pushing in through the evening, bringing spells of rain, initially to the southwest, then into Wales, central southern England, Northern Ireland. And for the rest of England, actually the weather turns even wetter overnight with some heavy and persistent rain, particularly for southern Scotland, Northern England and parts of the southeast. Behind that, showers follow the rain for Wales and the southwest, and it's a mild night to come for many, 13 to 14 Celsius. But for the far north of Scotland, a cool start to Wednesday because the rain doesn't quite reach here Plenty of sunny spells and fine weather persisting through Wednesday, but the rain stalls across central belts into central parts of Scotland. A lot of cloud there for parts of Aberdeenshire, keeping things cool, whilst slow-moving showers affect Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, northern England, with fast-moving showers further south on a brisk breeze. 22 Celsius in London. Away from the showers, it will feel still relatively warm, but a cool day to come for the northeast, with low teens more likely. And then the cloud and some outbreaks of rain continue across North Wales, northern England, into parts of western and southwestern Scotland overnight. Further south, some clear spells, but for the vast majority, those temperatures will stay up in the double figures as we begin Thursday. A cloudy start for many, a lot of low cloud lurking around these North Sea coasts, but bright conditions for the south, at least during the morning, before another band of cloud and rain pushes into Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest by the afternoon. 1 or 2 showers elsewhere, and behind the rain in the west, the weather turns increasingly windy later Thursday and into much of Friday and Saturday.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices. With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Professor Matt Goodwin and Charlie Lawson still to come this hour. But first, time for The Clash. Now, as I said in my digest at the top of the show, the anti-Boris MSM have been campaigning to depose the PM for 6 solid months. And today, the Tory anger at the BBC bubbled over live on air. So here's a reminder of what happened when Red Wall hero Lee Anderson challenged the Boris-bashing corporation presenter Gitu Guru Murphy live.
A man who's lied to the Queen, lied to the House of Commons, lied to the public, and they don't trust him
what people
anymore.
see, Gitu, is a witch hunt led by the BBC, led by the Labour Party and the mainstream.
It's the Conservative MPs who voted, not any of the media.
Had it in for Boris from day one. It's been a massive witch hunt. It's about time he got off his back. Let him crack on with running the country. Come back and talk to me in 2 years' time when he's delivered on his promises, and then we'll see where we are.
There is no witch hunt, I can assure you, from the BBC or any of...
My inbox is full of people complaining about the BBC all the time, saying it should be defunded. It's a massive witch hunt by you and the Labour Party and the mainstream media. You're on his case all the time. Even now, you don't want to let this drop, are you? You're going to go on and on and on.
So, do you agree with Lee Anderson that the BBC and the mainstream media are on a witch hunt against Boris Johnson? Email me your thoughts to dan@gbnews.uk. Tweet me at GBNews. You can also vote in our Twitter poll. While you're there, I'll bring you the results.
and your reactions shortly. But duking it out tonight, I'm joined by the man of the hour himself, Conservative MP for Ashfield Lee Anderson, as well as the broadcaster and author Nina Mishkov, and former BBC journalist and author of The Noble Liar, Robin Aitken. Great to have all three of you here, but of course, Lee, I have to kick off with you, because that was a real moment earlier today. Very few MPs are actually ever prepared to challenge the BBC publicly because of the power that they wield as an organisation. So what made you decide to have that confrontation with the presenter on air today? Was it pre-planned, or did you just feel it in the moment?
Well, good evening, everybody. No, it wasn't pre-planned, Dan. I wasn't even due to do a BBC interview today, and I normally steer well clear of them because of their outrageous bias towards people like me and the Prime Minister. But I was on the green. I'd done a few interviews this morning with some decent media companies like GB News, and I thought to myself, you know what, the BBC collared me. I thought, let's have a go. And I knew what was coming. It's the usual horrible attack lines. You know, when they're interviewing you, the BBC, and you know, swathes the MSM, they don't let you finish an answer. When you start answering and you don't give them the answer they want, they then chip in with another question to try and trip you up. Well, I'm not having it. You know, I'm sick to death of them. My inbox is full of people who are fed up to death of the BBC. There are biased, have been biased for the last 20-odd years. It's time we defunded them, and it's time that MPs like me fought back and told them exactly what we think of them.
And Lee, you made a very good point. I mean, obviously she didn't like any of your points, and she insisted the BBC wasn't on a witch hunt. But you made a very good point that they're not ever going to let this rest, are they? I presume you were talking about Partygate, because it feels like they're just obsessed. There comes a moment where there should be a full stop and they should move on to cover important issues, and then they find another reason to make Partygate the top story.
I mean, these people at the BBC are a privileged bunch of whatever you want to call them. I think some of them are closet politicians. Deep down, they want to be politicians. They haven't got the talent. You know, nobody will ever vote for these people because they're totally out of touch. And they hate the fact that somebody like me, a thick northern miner, can be an MP. They hate the fact that somebody like Boris, an Eton educated, privately educated, you know, man of privilege, can be in the same party with me. They just hate the whole setup. They hate Brexit. They hate everything we stand for. And what they will do, I mean, at the moment, the BBC is actually the official opposition in this country. The Labour Party are next to useless. And it's the BBC and the mainstream media that are beating us with a stick. And quite frankly, some of the behaviour from the BBC, they're like vultures circling. They're pecking at the Prime Minister all the time. Look, I'm not happy with everything he's done, but leave the man alone, give him a break, and let him get on with running this country.
Nina Mishkov, I presume you disagree with Lee Anderson. Go, Nina.
I disagree entirely with Lee, and just because somebody has a different point of view from you, you think they're biased. There is no witch hunt. A witch hunt is a vendetta, an unfair vendetta, which means it has no authority to attack somebody. Now, the BBC are only mirroring what the people, that's just remember what this is about, people, your constituents, ordinary people are thinking. A YouGov poll has said that 70% of the people do not want to move on. They are not happy with this.
When was the last time you spoke to people in my constituency, Nina? You've never spoke to them. You're talking nonsense. Absolute nonsense.
What in the journalist's questioning did you object to? Just because she said to you, Boris Johnson was a liar. Now, is that not true, that he is a liar?
Lee. Well, she said that he's lied to the Queen. Do we know that? Do we? Are we?
No, we don't know that.
He has not
know that he's lied to the Queen.
How else did he get it to sign? Proroguing Parliament.
Well, listen, let me come back, please, Dan. I mean,
Nina's just let Lee respond, Nina. Nina, let Lee respond.
She's making some ridiculous points, but I mean, I understand that. But she's saying that, you know, she's talking about my constituents. I bet you don't even know where Ashfield is, Nina. Have you ever been to Ashfield?
I do know, it's in Nottingham.
And
your majority was 5,700. I know a lot about you. And you were voted in November 2019. You were a red wall.
OK, don't talk over each other. Don't talk over each other. I want to bring Robin Aitken in on this now, because, Robin, obviously you know a lot about the BBC. You've analysed this organisation closely. You used to work at the organisation. So from a macro level, what do you think about this point from Lee that they've been on a witch hunt against Boris Johnson?
Well, the first thing I'd like to say is that I wish more MPs would stand up to the MSM the way Lee did today.
Totally.
Because, you say that this bias has been there for 20 years. I can tell you it goes back a lot further than that.
Really?
I started my career with the BBC in the 1970s, and I worked through into the early noughties. And throughout that time, there was a clear and consistent bias towards the left. The point is that any Tory starts off as guilty until proven innocent in the BBC's eyes. And Boris, in particular, has attracted their ire for a very clear reason, which is that he served the death knell on their favoured position with the EU. This, the animus against Boris is because he is the man who spearheaded the Brexit campaign and got Britain out of the EU. And that is something which I don't think the BBC will ever forgive him for. And
Nina, so Robbins worked there, Nina. He says there's an ingrained bias. I mean, you can't deny that.
I am not. And when did Robin leave?
He said the early noughties.
Well, that's 20 years ago.
2000. Nina, just before you contradict me, Nina.
Nina, just let Robin make this point, and then you can come back, Nina.
Nina, let me say this. I was a BBC reporter for 25 years. I ended up on the Today programme. In my last years at the BBC, I was so fed up by what were clear instances of unfair bias against the right that I compiled a dossier which I presented to the governors of the BBC. You can imagine that didn't exactly endear me either to them or to my bosses. But I felt that the bias was so egregious that I had to have my say. Now, let me give you a statistic. In the years between 2005 and 2015, in all the Brexit debates carried on the Today programme, of all those interviews, only 3% of those interviews were by people who favoured Brexit.
I mean, Nina, that is an astonishing statistic, Nina.
Do you understand what that means?
Do you mind if I talk now? We've listened to you giving your lecture for quite a long time.
Yes, Robin, let Nina come back now.
For heaven's sake.
Let Nina come back now, and then I'll bring you in.
I am not here as an apologist for the BBC. I don't work for the BBC. I'm not on contract to the BBC. And the BBC does get things wrong like every other media organisation. But I think it's entirely unfair to talk about something when you've left the organisation 20 years ago. The BBC, as far as I can understand it, try and keep a balance. When they interview people in the street, there's always somebody pro, there's somebody against, and there's somebody in the middle. So that is absolutely fair. And that is not a right-wing witch hunt against Boris. Boris is being exposed for what he is, and it's also... I have a headline here, Hollow Victory Tears Tories Apart. It's from that well-known left-wing rag, the Daily Telegraph. Now, is that a witch hunt on the part of the Daily Telegraph?
Okay, well, let Lee come in.
I think not.
Let Lee come in.
Not.
So, Nina says there's no witch hunt.
Well, I'll tell you what, Dan, I wish the BBC had a witch hunt in the 70s, 80s and 90s against people like Rolf Harris and Jimmy Savile. They wouldn't be in the mess that they're in now. You know, they're very selective in which
we're
people...
Not discussing
Let me
that
finish,
now.
Nina. You've had your say and nobody's listening to you. They're very selective in which people they have witch hunts with. Look, it is a witch hunt. Anybody with any common sense knows it's a witch hunt. Come and talk to some real people on the streets of Ashfield. They'll say a couple of things. Defund the BBC. We're fed up to the back teeth of them.
And so, Lee, you are getting... Because I was fascinated by this comment that you made on the BBC earlier. So you're getting regular emails now, just from ordinary constituents, not Tory party members or anything, just your ordinary constituents who are so fed up with the BBC they want it to be defunded.
Last couple of years, even through the nightly bulletins on COVID, it was a witch hunt then. It was gotcha journalism. They was asking questions to the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary. These weren't the questions that were coming into my inbox. It was their own agenda. It was just questions trying to trip up, catch out the government all the time. And quite frankly, if you live in the real world, if you talk to real people, you will know that people have had enough of them.
In the real world, 60% of people in this country want Boris Johnson gone. Over 70% of the people do not want us to move on from this situation. After the weekend of the Jubilee, when we've been honouring a woman who has, for her duty, her loyalty, her integrity, her truth, her service, that merely showed up the contrast between her and her Prime Minister, and the fact that Boris Johnson was booed on the way into that service on Friday, and most broadcasters did not make a big thing of it, but he was
Well, the BBC
booed.
did.
But he,
The
no,
BBC,
they didn't.
They
And
did.
I listened to it.
But the BBC News did. The BBC News did. There were 2 BBC feeds.
It wasn't, and you could hear it, and
It was.
people just, and he was booed in a restaurant and gave people the finger. Now this is what's happening, Lee. I warn you. You'll go back to your constituency, and the people have changed. People will not behave.
OK, final word to you, Lee. Do you think that is what's going to happen?
I mean, we're talking about bias, Dan. I think Nina sounds biased tonight on this show.
I'm not biased. I'm straight down the middle.
I challenge you. I challenge you, Nina. Come. I'm sure you've been booed in the past, but come to Ashfield and talk to some people on the streets of Ashfield. And I tell you what, I was out over the weekend talking to people at Jubilee parties, and 90% of them didn't give a monkeys. And the ones that did want him sacking says, let the general public decide that at the general election.
OK, that's the challenge. I think we've got to get Nina to Ashfield. I like it. Thank you so much to all 3 of you.
I don't go north of Selfridges.
Well, that says it all. That was Conservative MP Lee Anderson, the broadcaster and author Nina Mishkov, and the former BBC journalist and author of The Noble Liar, Why the BBC Distorts the News to Promote a Liberal Agenda. Fascinating book, Robin Aitken. So who do you agree with on this? Is the BBC and the mainstream media on a witch hunt against Boris Johnson? That's our question tonight. And John on Twitter says the answer is yes, but Boris is doing enough on his own to show he is not fit to be PM. Dom says, happened with Trump in the USA, now happening here. Reporting the news, don't try and create it with relentless campaigns. And from Kim on email, yep, definitely. But in reality, he isn't doing a very good job. However, he's got a second chance, so he must now do more for the people of the UK. And your verdict is now in. Wow. Wow. 85% of you agree that the BBC and the MSM are on a witch hunt for the PM. Just 15% of you say they're simply doing their job. Whoa. Coming up. Is Gareth Southgate essentially calling those who don't support England taking the knee stupid? Footy fan, ex-Corrie actor and man of the people Charlie Lawson weighs in on those galling comments from the beautiful game's wokest manager. He's tonight's outsider. But first, will an all-out blitz on the cost of living help Boris save his premiership? Political analyst, author and Red Wall authority Professor Matthew Goodwin presents his action plan for the PM to get back on track straight after the break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
COVID Recovery Group Chair Mark Harper gives evidence to my lockdown inquiry soon. But first, a defiant Boris Johnson today urged his party to, quote, draw a line under questions about his leadership after fending off Tory rebels in a crunch no-confidence vote last night.
Thank you, by the way, everybody, for all your good work yesterday, because which was a very important day, because we're able now to draw a line under the issues that our opponents want to talk about, and we're able to get on with talking about what I think the people of this country want us to talk about.
So, as you remember, the PM won yesterday's ballot by 211 votes to 148, but the scale of the rebellion against him means the knives are still well and truly out. But is there a way Boris can save his premiership? Well, acclaimed political analyst, Professor Matt Goodwin, joins me now with a three-point plan. He's an expert in red wall politics who has written books on Brexit, populism and public opinion. Matt, great to have you here. So what's the first thing the PM needs to do to bring himself back from the brink?
Well, I've spent the last couple of days talking to Red Wall MPs who have made a really important point, Dan, which is they want to go out and defend the Prime Minister, they want to go out and defend the government, but they feel like they haven't got the Conservative policies that they need in order to be able to do that. And I think, in essence, what he's got to do is come out and just declare all-out war on the cost of living crisis. He's got to get back to what he was promising people in that 2019 manifesto, which was a low-tax Conservative government that was going to reduce the size of the state, was going to unleash the productivity and entrepreneurial spirit of the United Kingdom. And I think they've really lost sight of that original mission, Dan. It's not hard to see why. We had COVID, we had the pandemic, now we've got Ukraine, but he's got to lower the tax burden, the biggest tax burden since the 1950s. He's got to start looking at things like environmental levies. He's got to look at corporation tax and VAT. He's got to start actually, I think, looking at the institutions that are getting all of this spending and say, are we spending this money in the right way? Or do we need to actually now think about reforming some of these big institutions, the NHS being one of them, to make sure that when we do spend money, we spend it in a much more efficient, clever way? And there's just none of that so far, Dan. And I think that's my frustration here. You know, I've talked to people around the PM since January, and I've been saying, you know, you guys have got to get back to your original core message here. And if you don't, you know, this whole thing's going to come crashing down.
Why do you think he's been so reluctant to do that, Matt? Is it the forces around him? I mean, some people say he's very influenced, for example, by his wife.
I think there's always been a question mark over whether Boris Johnson gets the realignment of politics that you've talked about so much on this show and GB News have talked so much about. Has he been, you know, too economically and socially liberal in his instincts? Does he really get the people who are voting for him and what they want? I think that's a real question. I don't know necessarily where that influence is coming from, but he struggled to kind of connect with Workington Man. He struggled to connect with the Bolsovers and Mansfields and all of those seats. So to be honest, Dan, if they lose those seats, it's game over, right? I mean, the Conservatives are going to lose a big chunk of the South at the next election, really, no matter what they do. There's going to be a lot of southern losses in and around London and the southern commuter belt. So their only way forward here, the only strategy here, is to expand the areas that they've started to eat into in 2019. They've got to expand the Midlands, the North, and all those kinds of areas. And that means being culturally conservative, leaning, you know, pretty strongly to the right on culture and identity, and being economically conservative. What did Lord Frost come out with today? He said, the problem with the government is it isn't economically conservative. Esther McVey said the problem with the government is during the pandemic it became a socialist government, expanded the state, became sort of big supporter of that. Now, I wouldn't go as far as Esther McVey, but I would say that actually I think Lord Frost has got a point. The economic conservatism here has got lost in the last 2 years. The party's got to get back to that in order to hold this unique electoral coalition together.
Yeah, well, it was quite similar to what you're saying, what Lord Frost said. He said, bring down taxes straight away to tackle the cost of living crisis, take on public service reform, and establish an affordable and reliable energy policy for the long term. 3 quite simple things, but of course, things that go completely against the agenda, which has sadly been spend, tax, at least from the Chancellor. So do you think, Matt, there needs to be an actual reset moment, an acknowledgement from Boris Johnson publicly that we've veered off course and we're going to do a bit of a 180?
Well, in a sense, we had that in January, right? This is the second reset. The big reset in January at the beginning of the year was get number 10 working. So get rid of a lot of people that weren't really bringing out the best in the Prime Minister and put in some people who understand the PM, what he's about, and try and stabilise that number 10 operation. So that was reset 1 in January. Now, that was supposed to really have been followed with, big, robust, appealing policies that would reconnect with the voters that the party's been losing quite dramatically in the polling over the last year. And those policies, with the exception of illegal migration, those policies have been, few and far between. So this second reset, what we're living through now, is really about policy and ideology. But Dan, he hasn't got 3 months to kind of, reflect on what he's going to do. He's got like 3 days. This is urgent in that they're going into 2 by-elections that are going to be pretty brutal. We can all sense that these are not going to be good by-election results for the Conservative Party. And he's going into then an even more difficult summer as his critics will pile pressure on the 22 committee to try and change the rules in the summer. So that means he's going now to have to come up with something very quickly, as in yesterday. And so far, I think this is why Lord Frost hit the airwaves, why Esther McVey is hitting the airwaves, why others are joining this conversation. It's because so far, there's something that isn't quite clicking in his head. He doesn't necessarily grasp, the urgency of the situation and the need to sort of come out with something compelling and bold.
Well, I hope he's listening to you all, because just finally, Matt, obviously yesterday he lost to Hannah Davidson, one of the Red Wall MPs, who you could argue almost definitely wouldn't have her seat if it weren't for Boris Johnson. How significant was that defection?
So I think that alongside the looming Wakefield by-election, these are significant things in that they're gradually undermining Johnson's claim to be the only person who can hold that unique piece of territory that stretches across from North Wales to the East Coast. And, it's remarkable, Dan, that we're even having this conversation. It was only last year they were winning Hartlepool for the first time since Cliff Richard was singing about, Living Doll in the 1950s. I mean, it's remarkable that we're having this conversation already. And to be frank, the local elections in large parts of northern England actually were not that bad. But already the narrative is beginning to creep in and it's going to be inflamed by Wakefield. So he's going to have to, I personally think, get out of London, get out of SW1, start spending a lot more time in the Northeast, Yorkshire, the Midlands, change the symbolism of his premiership. And, the one thing about Johnson you can say is he's a good campaigner and he's good when he's up against the ropes. And somehow he finds that narrow path through when everybody thinks he's not going to find it. He needs to now double down on that immediately. He needs to double down on that sort of instinctive strength, that instinctive skill that he has. He is a good campaigner. I mean, we know that. He's a good campaigner. He's won London twice. He's won the biggest majority since '87. So I think he kind of needs to rediscover that and come out the gate with something new to say around taxation, around energy, and give these MPs I keep talking to, give them some ammunition. Give them some ammunition to go out into the trenches and say, we're going to defend this government.
Because, as you say, they want to support him. And Ben Houchen, the Tees Valley Mayor, who was here yesterday, saying that when he's campaigning with Boris is still swamped, even in the last couple of weeks, still people mobbing him, wanting his selfie. So there's certainly still that political or personal pull, but you're right, he's got to get the policies right. So fascinating analysis as ever. I hope Boris was listening. That was political analyst, academic and author Matt Goodwin. But coming up, is it really necessary for the NHS to add the COVID-19 vaccine to its standard list of childhood jabs? I'll get the verdict of my superstar panel in the Media Buzz at 10. We'll also discover how the first newspaper front pages are covering the aftermath of last night's conference vote. But first, are England players taking the knee, educating ignorant fans? Well, woke manager Gareth Southgate seems to think so. I'm joined in The Outsider by former Corrie actor and man of the people, Charlie Lawson, who wants to give Southgate a piece of his mind. Don't miss that next.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
A first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages coming up. But first, Charlie Lawson is tonight's outsider. And as England religiously took the knee against, again, in blind support of Black Lives Matter in tonight's Nations League game against Germany, thus standing by the gesture despite the backlash they received against Hungary over the weekend. The squad were fiercely booed by the 30,000 teenagers and kids ushered in for Saturday's closed-door game who appeared clued up on BLM's anti-capitalist, pro-Marxist leanings. So England lost the game 1-0, but the bigger talking point was Southgate's tone-deaf reaction to that booing. Instead of trying to understand why people are against shallow political gestures for an increasingly suspect organisation, the England manager instead claimed his morally superior, virtue-signalling men were trying to, quote, educate people and save them from what he called inherited thinking. Look.
Very surprised, but I think that that's why we do it. You know, we do it to try to educate, and I think why young people can only be influenced by older people. I thought there were sort of pantomime boos when our team came out to warm up. That was different with the taking of the knee, but that felt like inherited thinking to me.
Footy fan, ex-Corrie actor and voice of the people, Charlie Lawson, is here now. So, Charlie, are people who criticise BLM, like me, are we just too stupid to understand what this is all about, as Gareth Southgate seemed to suggest there?
I think I'd suggest to Gareth that perhaps he should just concentrate on managing the football team and shut up about the rest of the stuff, because he's just making a plonker of himself. Everybody knows now at this stage that whilst 3 years ago, whatever, we all listened and we all looked and we thought, right, we all know Black Lives Matter, so let's just pay attention to this. But very, very quickly it became obvious that this organization bore no resemblance really to what it stood for, like Black Lives Matter. And that is a long time ago. And Gareth really now should shut up, bless him, and concentrate on trying to qualify and trying to progress and trying to make his side perform better. You know, they should be.
Yeah. Well, especially, Charlie, especially, can I just say, given that the World Cup is being hosted in Qatar. So, I'm sorry, are they going to be taking a knee in Qatar where it's illegal to be gay, where female rape victims can be put in jail? I mean, it's laughable. If they actually cared about social issues, they wouldn't be going to Qatar.
It appears to me that there must be some people in the squad who probably entirely agree with you, Dan, but are not prepared to speak up, because they really are going to make excuse my French, but they're going to make themselves look like absolute dickheads if they go to Qatar and start taking a knee and all the rest.
I know.
Look, it's virtue signalling beyond belief, and it's just getting silly, and it's making a fool of everybody, including, English fans. And we all know some English fans behaved badly when those penalties were missed, and that was disgraceful. And I believe the 11 arrests and what have you. And apart from anything else, I would suspect that Marcus Rashford would be the first to stick his paw up and say, I want to take a penalty. Don't worry about me, boss. But that was another thing that he was saying today.
Yeah, because he basically suggested that he would
be
think
intimidated.
twice. Yeah, he would think twice about choosing a black player because of the reaction. Well, I would say that's racism. You know, you can't make decisions based on the fact that someone might experience racism because of a few lunatics. But one thing, Charlie, that I feel very strongly about is the people who boo the taking of the knee are not racist because they are booing the Black Lives Matter organisation. If you look into the Black Lives Matter organisation, Charlie, I mean, they want to defund the police. They want to dismantle the family unit. We know their organisation in the US has taken millions and millions of dollars, which they seem to be spending on big mansions. I mean, that's what people are booing.
Yeah, and I mean, Twigamala, the rugby player, excuse me if I've got the pronunciation wrong, but he's a Christian man and of colour, if you like, and he refused to take the knee, and I believe he got into a bit of trouble. I mean, I looked at this beforehand because I had a recollection of certain international rugby sides not taking the knee, and indeed they didn't in 2021. I also looked at rugby would be one of my favourite sports. I also looked at the racing industry, and nobody was taking knees there. It seems to be a sort of an exclusive gesture by the England football side or English Premier League players. I don't know whether they're still doing it, but all I can say is that now that people know the ins and outs of Black Lives Matter. And incidentally, Dan, can I say before all my trolls wake up and get out of their kennels and start shouting and calling me a fascist, my two grandsons, Reuben and Noah, are of mixed race or young boys of colour or they're whatever you're allowed to call them now, okay? So don't out there start wagging your fingers at me because, you know, I am not. I just believe. No, I believe that the whole issue that we've lived through of identity politics and futile gestures. I mean, if you go back now and look at Angela Rayner and Keir Starmer in that photograph, you can't help but just go, oh, for God's sake, what are you... I rest my...
That man cannot be our Prime Minister. Perfect point to rest your case. Charlie Lawson tonight's outsider. Great to chat. Thank you, Charlie. It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, the media-driven coup to oust Boris Johnson and reverse Brexit has sensationally unravelled, leaving wet Tory rebels backing down today and the left in a flap. We'll take a first look at how tomorrow's newspapers are coping with the PM's reset next. Plus, with the PM's COVID policies arguably beginning his fall from grace, I'll ask prominent anti-lockdown voice chair of the COVID recovery group and former Tory chief whip Mark Harper if the Partygate sham proves Britain should never have lockdown in the first place. He'll give evidence to my lockdown inquiry at 10:15. In further coronavirus madness, just why has the NHS included COVID jabs for 5 to 15-year-olds in its schedule of childhood vaccinations? I'll get stuck into that next with tonight's superstar panel, the former Daily Star editor Dawn Neeson, conservative commentator Calvin Robinson and feminist journalist Rebecca Reid. As Bear Korma continues to struggle with basic biology...
99.9% probably of women, it's all biology. We must support them. Safe spaces, more women's equality.
Is women's sport facing a bigger threat than ever before after two trans competitors win a major cycling race? We'll go through the gears on that in our Media Buzz at 10:30. Plus, are we doing enough to scrutinise the globalist agenda pushed by the World Health Organization and World Economic Forum?
Will always be points where we say we should have done different. This has been so horrible, and by the way, the pandemic's not finished. It's still going on.
So those words will scare people because they're thinking we're just getting back to life, and you're telling us from the WHO it's not over.
Guerrilla journalist Avi Yemini, the man who confronted those unaccountable execs with so much control over our lives in Davos, joins me in Uncancelled at 10:40. And it was once held by Prince Harry, but the royal family's new cheeky, chappy favourite has been crowned, and super nanny Jo Frost gives her verdict on Prince Louis's hilarious Jubilee antics, including silencing Mum Kate. That's coming up soon. And will Meghan Markle's questionable parenting see her crown tonight's Union Jackass? I'll also pick my greatest Britain and GBUJ before the end of the show. But before all of that, the news headlines at 10 with Miranda Shulka.
Thank you, Dan. Good evening. The top stories from the GB newsroom. Glastonbury Festival and the Test match cricket are among the events likely to be affected by a 3-day national rail strike. Tens of thousands of workers are taking part in the biggest walkout on the network in over 3 decades. The RMT union says the industrial action will take place on the 21st, 23rd and 25th of June. It's after unions and rail bosses failed to reach an agreement in a row over pay freezes and job cuts. Well, Rail Delivery Group Chairman Steve Montgomery is hoping talks will resume ahead of the strike.
Obviously, we're extremely disappointed with the announcement from RMT. There's clearly striking. No one wins out of striking. So it's really important we ask RMT to get back round the table.
Boris Johnson's promised to cut taxes and reduce the cost of government. The Prime Minister is asking his cabinet to find ways to cut costs to the public and business in an effort to try and boost the economy. The PM thanked his ministers for their support after he saw off a vote of confidence in his leadership last night. But Mr Johnson has been left bruised after 41% of his party didn't back him. Well, the Chancellor has risen to the Prime Minister's challenge and says he'll cut business taxes in the autumn. Rishi Sunak is bringing forward a range of measures to encourage investment. In a speech to the Onward think tank, he said the government and the market need to work together to grow the economy. It follows criticism from the Confederation of British Industry that the Treasury's cost of living support package last month didn't include help for cash-strapped businesses. From tomorrow, doctors will legally have to notify the authorities if they suspect a patient is suffering from monkeypox. It's after the UK Health Security Agency declared the virus a notifiable disease. Efforts are underway to stop the spread as more than 300 cases are confirmed in the UK. And more than a fifth of people in the UK say they're skipping meals to save money. Research by the Food Standards Agency says 3/4 of the population say the cost of food is a major future concern. Nearly 1 in 6 people are now using food banks. And a plane carrying the Earl and Countess of Wessex has been forced to make an emergency landing. Prince Edward and his wife Sophie were on their way to Gibraltar as part of a tour to mark the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. But their flight returned to Heathrow because of a technical issue. They safely made it to the Rock today, though, just a little later than scheduled. Well, on TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Dan Wootton tonight.
Tomorrow's News Tonight now in our Media Buzz. And let's kick off with a very first look at the front pages hot off the press. The Metro leads with the total rail shutdown about to hit Brits. Britain's train network will grind to a halt this month after the Rail Workers' Union ordered a 3-day strike. 50,000 will walk off the job on June 21st, and what the union boasts is the biggest industrial action for a generation. Shame on them. Also, this is just astonishing. The Daily Telegraph leads on calls for Boris Johnson to make Jeremy Hunt his Chancellor. It's reported that the PM's allies are pushing for a, quote, dream team to nullify Hunt as a leadership rival and heal a divided party. Elsewhere, the paper details how the NHS has been told to cut waste and wokery in a landmark report that sets out the biggest shake-up of its management in a generation. Let me tell you, there's no dream team when Hunt's Chancellor. That's all of my nightmares coming true. And Boris Johnson and his allies must resist that, because all that does is put Jeremy Hunt in pole position to be the next Prime Minister of this country. Hell no. My superstar panel back with me now, former editor and current columnist at the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, the Conservative commentator Calvin Robertson, and the author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Now, just when I start to think COVID common sense has prevailed and we never have to think about that damn virus again, along comes the NHS to remind us that it's still almost exclusively a national COVID service. In their latest questionable move, they've now added the COVID jab as part of the standard list of vaccines given to 5 to 15-year-olds alongside conditions such as measles, mumps, meningitis and some cancers caused by HPV. These are illnesses, of course, proven to pose a real risk, a major risk to children. Unlike COVID, 32 under 12s are registered as having died due to the virus in England and Wales between March 2020 and April 2022, according to the ONS. And while every passing is a tragedy, that's just under 0.02% of the people who died within 28 days of a positive test in the same nations over the same period. Despite this and a lowly uptake in 5 to 11-year-olds of around 8% as of last month, the NHS has been pushing the COVID jab hard, with the Daily Telegraph reporting the NHS trusts have been writing letters to children urging them to get vaccinated. A spokesperson insisted the material was clearly aimed at families. Now, Rebecca Reid, you're a new mother, of course, and how do you feel about the COVID jab being given the same weight as jabs for meningitis and measles? I mean, are you going to vaccinate your newborn?
Well, so we did jabs yesterday, and it's a fairly unpleasant experience. I cried, she cried, it was awful. But the thing is, she was vaccinated against a whole load of things that she's very, very, very unlikely to get, and would probably be fine if she did get. That's very much the way that we do vaccinations in this country. And vaccination is generally very safe. For me, it's actually a fairly easy decision, because by the time she's old enough to have the COVID vaccine, we'll have 5 more years of data. So by that point, I will be able to say, that seems absolutely fine. I don't envy parents who are in the situation of being offered it for their 5-year-old right now, because that's effectively your child being the dummy.
The big pharma companies, Rebecca, they're trialling giving it to 6 months old.
I think the thing is, it's almost certainly fine. It is genuinely almost certainly fine. But when it's your own child, the almost certainly becomes a very scary almost certainly.
Exactly, because
she would also almost certainly be fine. Like,
well, with
really
COVID, yes, she would be fine,
COVID.
absolutely. But
And then she gets natural immunity, which is how it works.
Absolutely. And I had COVID while I was pregnant, which will have handed on some immunity and stuff like that. However, if she gave it to one of her grandparents, which is one of the things that, in
the jab
theory,
doesn't stop transmission.
Well, there's debate about that, right? It's a back and forth about whether or not it wouldn't. It's a very...
Well, no, we know it doesn't.
My major thing is, I think I understand why people don't want to, and even though I'm very pro-vaccinations, and what I hate is this sneering about being afraid of it, like you're stupid or you're tinfoil hat.
You're afraid of the potential side effects of the jab.
And there almost certainly won't be, but again, almost certainly isn't certainly, and that's scary, and it's okay to be scared. So yes, I probably will do it, but it's okay that I'm nervous about it. That doesn't make me a bad person or an anti-vaxxer.
Calvin Robinson, you think this is an outrageous move?
This is terrifying, actually, because children are not at serious risk of severe illness from this disease, but they are at risk of the adverse effects from the vaccine, especially boys are in particular at risk from myocarditis and the likes. So I don't know why this has been recommended to people that don't need it. What is the agenda here? Who benefits from this other than Big Pharma?
My understanding was that more children had myocarditis from COVID than from the vaccine.
No, from the adverse effects of the vaccine, absolutely. Even the vaccine itself isn't suitable for adults, I would suggest. When we saw that the Pfizer data drop said, actually, it doesn't have a 95% efficacy, it has a 12% efficacy. And even after 2 weeks, that drops down to a negligible amount. The argument is whether it works for adults, never mind for children.
And there are
but when children aren't even at
stats
risk.
on myocarditis, and I don't think we have a clear picture, but certainly in young men and boys and teenagers, the stats that I've seen, it was a study out of California, there is a higher chance of getting myocarditis as a result of the jab than there is from COVID itself.
So I think, but there are studies, I've seen studies that suggest the opposite. So I think maybe it is a question of we don't have all the data. We don't know.
If you're weighing up the risk about something, whether you're definitely going to get the jab, so there is a likelihood of getting the adverse effects, or you're not as likely to catch the illness in the first place, how do you weigh up that risk?
I suppose the issue is when you're talking about an 11-year-old, do they have the capacity to weigh up that risk
for
themselves?
Got to weigh up the risk.
But I think that's fairly complicated in and of itself, because I think children having the right to consent to what's done to them. I, for instance, don't believe in ear piercing in children. I think it's very morally wrong. So actually, to what extent, as a parent, do you have the right for their... But I think there's a 5-year-old obviously can't consent.
Wouldn't have genetic competence.
But it does raise an interesting question about medical consent for children in general, I would say, and what right they have.
Jordan Easton, you're not as concerned as Calvin about this?
No, I'm not. I'm in between my two colleagues here. I mean, school-aged children are more likely to be hit by lightning than die of coronavirus. I mean, that has been statistically proven. And, various university studies have said that, we need a rational debate, and there's a tiny risk to children from COVID. That much we know.
But that's an astonishing statistic, isn't it?
It is an astonishing statistic.
We're vaccinating children for an illness where there is more chance of them dying from being hit by lightning.
Being hit by lightning.
I mean, it's astonishing.
That's astonishing, and that's where we are with
wasting so much money, Dawn.
But well, this is the point I wanted to make is I've got a friend who works in a care home. She's a carer. She looks after very vulnerable elderly people, and she and a lot of her colleagues are in danger of losing their jobs because they are not eligible at the moment to get that fourth COVID vaccine, which would enable them to carry on working in the care home, caring for the elderly and vulnerable. And yet we are encouraging children to have it. Surely the priorities are still wrong on this.
Final word, Rebecca.
Sorry, I don't know if this is actually interesting, but the HPV jab is an interesting comparison because your likelihood of getting HPV is fairly low, your likelihood of dying of it is very low, but because we know that there's no negative side effects from it, it kind of doesn't matter, so every life saved is a bonus. So if we get to the point where we know that this is safe, then fine, might as well jab everybody.
But we're not at that
stage
yet.
But I can see that at the moment we don't really truly know.
I mean, I would argue, having spoken to people on the show who have lost a leg, lost a relative, we know that we're never going to be at that stage. But the debate will continue. Now, of course, the star of the Jubilee weekend was Her Majesty the Queen, but coming in a close second, little Prince Louis, whose animated antics at the Buckingham Palace pageant on Sunday had royalists around the world cooing and cracking up in equal measure. However, I'm sure a few parents out there were empathising with Kate, who was seen having a quiet word with the 4-year-old. Well, the Duchess of Cambridge can rest easy because her parenting has received the royal seal of approval from the ultimate authority on child discipline, super nanny herself, Jo Frost. Yes, the British TV icon, there she is, whose groundbreaking techniques delighted millions of viewers and kept just as many parents from losing their marbles in the early noughties, has weighed in. She commented on social media that Louis did, quote, remarkably well, and that some acting up is to be expected from a, quote, strong-willed and highly sensitive child. She also described the Duke and Duchess as, quote, a great example, adding Catherine has never been afraid to tell the kids to stop in public. I love that about her. So there we go. No need to pop Louis on the Kensington Palace naughty step. Rebecca Reid, Calvin Robinson, Dawn Neeson. Do stand by, because coming up, is women's sport facing a bigger threat than ever before after 2 trans competitors win a major cycling race? And why does Keir Starmer think that only 99.9% of women don't have a penis? My superstar panel debate all of that in the media buzz at 10:30. But first, does the Partygate sham prove Britain should never have shut down in the first place? Chair of the COVID recovery group, former Tory Chief Whip Mark Harper, and one of Boris Johnson's harshest lockdown critics, gives evidence to my lockdown inquiry next.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
COVID recovery group chairman Mark Harper is the next to give evidence in my lockdown inquiry. And with Boris Johnson dramatically surviving last night's confidence vote, the question begs just how he got himself into that mess in the first place. Arguably, he was snookered by crusty Marks and Spencer's sandwiches and apple juice in number 10. But it was his insane lockdown policies that first saw former Tory allies turn against him. By printing money out of thin air and splashing billions on furlough and bailouts, he's also potentially damned us to economic hell and a raft of tax rises that continue to cripple the nation. So, Mark Harper, you were one of the most outspoken anti-lockdown voices in Parliament throughout this pandemic. How do you feel that it's this so-called Partygate that has now potentially, well, at least extremely damaged the PM? We don't know yet whether it will finish him off or not. Is there an irony in that?
Yeah, I think there is. And look, one of the reasons I've taken the position I have, and I
wrote to Sir Graham Brady and voted against the Prime Minister yesterday, although that's yesterday's fight, is because I took the rules very seriously. I voted against them a number of times, but my view was if the government's going to make rules and it's going to tell the public it's got to follow them, actually the government and the Prime Minister should have been the people following them the most carefully. And if they felt they were really tough rules and inappropriate, then they shouldn't have applied them to everybody else. And I think it is important that those that make the rules follow them. Even though I voted against the rules, once Parliament had put them into law, I followed them. And I think most members of Parliament did that. But I think there is a reflection about whether they were the right rules. But the point is, we insisted that everyone in the country followed them. So it's no good for ministers now arguing they were too harsh. If we said the country should follow them, then the people that ran the country should have followed them.
And I understand that point, but I actually wish we were having a discussion in this country. And of course, this is why we've been running this lockdown inquiry all year. And we've had lots of people on from all sides of the spectrum, by the way, because Matt Hancock has given evidence, so has Lord Frost, and there are two ministers throughout that period who have completely different views on lockdowns. But I actually wish, Mark, we were talking more about the fact that those rules were wrong, because I think we can now see that they were wrong in so many ways. The mental health effects, the economic effects, but it feels like, we just want to move on. We just want to forget about it, but I worry we're not going to learn the lesson.
No, I think it's important we do. And Steve Baker and I have written to Baroness Hallett, and we've said that we want to give evidence to the public inquiry.
And will they allow you?
Well, we've written to her and we've said we'll give evidence in whatever way she thinks is appropriate. I don't know whether she'll decide that should be in writing or whether Steve and I will be asked to go and give oral evidence. And we've said we particularly want to focus on the aspects you're concerned about, the laws that were made, the governance, how the government weighed those decisions up. That is in her terms of reference, so I hope she'll want to hear from us. And I think we should have that debate because, you and I had these conversations at the time. You took a lot of criticism on social media, as did we. And all we were doing was asking some sensible questions, making sure the government was balancing the necessity to protect people from COVID, but also the social harms, the harms to other health conditions,
and the damage to the NHS
economy
overall.
And that's all we were asking for. And I remember at the time, when I had the temerity to question some of the lockdown models, which turned out to be completely wrong because the assumptions were not realistic, bits of the government were briefing out that, we wanted to kill 90,000 people, which is rather offensive coming from the other side. But we were right.
Well, you were right, because I actually went back today and read some of your demands over the course of the pandemic. They were so reasonable, Mark. Let's have a cost-benefit analysis of these completely unprecedented policies that are being introduced. That never happened. There was never a cost-benefit analysis.
If you remember, when we first did this, we had a meeting with the Prime Minister and the government produced, was it called a cost-benefit analysis?
Was it?
No, and what was interesting about it, it got published, and before we'd even seen it, I think, your colleagues in the media had looked at it, and I think within about 5 minutes, most of them concluded it wasn't worth the paper it was printed on. And it wasn't, we didn't balance these things. And the thing that I really worry about, not just on the economy, but on the health service, the slogan that was used effectively scared people away from the health service, people who were ill. It caused other people who had what they thought may have been minor conditions to not seek treatment. And what we now know is there are something like 250 to 750,000 people who didn't get urgent cancer referral during that lockdown period. And you don't have to be very pessimistic to work out many of those people are going to have some very poor outcomes. I think we're going to be living with the impact on the health service and people's health for a very long time. And I think it's becoming really clear now, that we didn't balance these things out properly and the right judgments weren't made. And we mustn't forget that. We need to learn those lessons so that we don't do it again.
Exactly, but those lessons aren't being learned. I've, for example, watched all of the speeches in Parliament after as part of after the Sue Gray report, the publication, and there was just an assumption that lockdowns saved lives. Now, I think increasingly that's an assumption that can't be made, because if you look at Sweden, for example, which was really one of the only comparable Western democracies that did take a different approach based more on guidance and not shutting down the society, while initially, when you were just looking at the peak, their numbers didn't look great. Now, when you look at all-cause mortality, which, let's be honest, that's what matters, Sweden's strategy looks very sensible.
Yeah, and I think if you look at how the British people responded, I think there's a very strong argument that if we'd laid out the evidence for people, explained how the virus worked, explained the measures you could take to protect yourself, you could have actually trusted people to make those judgments for themselves and balance the really difficult issues about, did you go and see someone who was dying? Did you go to a funeral of a very important loved one? Yes, there was risk attached to that, but it should have been up to individuals to make those judgments. And I'm quite pleased, actually. One of the things I think we did achieve by asking those questions just before Christmas last year, you'll remember 101 Conservative MPs voted against illiberal, divisive vaccine passports. And that achieved two things. One is that we never had them. They didn't become law. But most importantly, it meant that we stopped the government, and I know from talking to a number of ministers, I'm absolutely clear about this, delivering those votes in Parliament stopped ministers introducing some sort of restrictions again over the Christmas New Year period.
Which we now know would have been utter madness.
And that would have been the wrong decision to have done, but actually the government was very close to doing it. It was only because we delivered
they were listening
those
to the
votes in
doomsday
Parliament
scientists.
and again, their backbones.
Yeah, no, again, one of the things that you called for throughout this period was just a broader group of scientific views advising the government, which is eminently sensible. You weren't even saying, like I was, get rid of Witty, get rid of Valence. I wanted all of Sage gone because I think they blew it. All you were saying is let's have some other scientific voices as part of it. But look, and this comes, I guess, to a big party political issue at the moment. Do you think it is fair to judge politicians based on the policy position that they took during COVID?
I think it's reasonable to... Yes, I do. And I think it's reasonable to look at the judgments they made, also what they've reflected afterwards. I mean, look, people had different views during COVID, and it's perfectly reasonable for people to say, well, I am a bit annoyed about people who now pretend they didn't hold the views they did during that period, because we have found...
That's very relevant.
We have found the COVID recovery group now has a lot more adherence than I remember at the time. I remember there are people now who pretend they were on our side who I don't remember.
Well, look, I think in a few years' time there won't be anyone who says they're pro-lockdown. But the reason that I ask is because, of course, Jeremy Hunt is at the centre of political discussion in the Tory party. I've just shown the front page of the Daily Telegraph, which says a whole load of Boris allies are actually campaigning for him to become Chancellor. Now, the reason he is at the centre of the discussion is, of course, Nadine Dorries revealed this week that when she was health minister in the early days of the pandemic, he called her advocating for a Chinese-style approach to COVID, which included at the time, if you tested positive, you would be forcibly removed from your house, you'd be put into a hotel. There's also a viral clip that I've played on my show many times where Jeremy Hunt seems to speak positively about the way the Chinese authoritarian government was dealing with COVID. So for me, Mark, that makes me feel like I don't want him in a position of power in this country. Again, I know many of the anti-lockdown advocates who I follow feel the same. Do you feel the same?
Well, look, I'd say two things. That first of all, I've seen what various people have said about each other, and my own view is, and this is the way Steve Baker and I conducted the COVID recovery group. We had a broad range of colleagues in the COVID recovery group from across the party, different intakes, different views on leave and remain, different views on lots of things. We always try to run it in a very collegiate way. And when we were challenging the government, I was always very conscious that although I might have very much disagreed with the particular policy position at the time, the ministers at the dispatch box were my colleagues. So we always tried to do it in a very reasonable way. And I perhaps would offer the view that the way we ran that and the way we approached it and the way we spoke about colleagues is perhaps a lesson that people might think about for the future. So I don't want to get into sort of criticising particularly colleagues in an intemperate way, but I think what is relevant is to judge people on, it is reasonable to judge politicians on decisions they've made, on conclusions they reached, and why they reached them. And also, by the way, people can change their views. If people say, I thought this then, but I've looked at it and now I've reflected and I realise that position was wrong and I've changed my mind, that's fine.
But admit that you were wrong.
You didn't hold those views at the time I mean, as I said, there are lots of people I don't remember ever coming to a meeting of the COVID recovery group or ever being in our division lobby who now say that they were massively against lockdowns and massively in favour of what we were arguing. It is a little bit hard to take. So I think people should just be straight about it. I think in politics, if you're straight about your views, straight about what, or be honest with people about why you've reached them, then I think you get a lot of respect from people.
Look, you were definitely on the right side of history with this one. Mark Harper, chair of the COVID recovery group. Thank you for giving evidence in my lockdown inquiry, and I hope you do get to give evidence in the official COVID inquiry too, because I think that's really important. But coming up, is there enough scrutiny of the globalist agenda pushed by the World Health Organization and World Economic Forum? Rebel News guerrilla journalist Avi Yemini is part of the resistance, taking those entities to task. He's uncancelled at 10:40. But next, as Sir Bear Korma continues to not understand what a woman is, I'm asking, is women's sport more under threat than ever before after two trans competitors win a major cycling race? The media buzz is next, and we'll discover how more of tomorrow's newspapers are covering the aftermath of the confidence vote too. Back in a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Let's return to tomorrow's news tonight in our media buzz. Lots of front pages in The Guardian, unsurprisingly, reporting that Tory MPs are plotting vote strikes to keep Johnson on the ropes. The rebels are reportedly preparing to copy tactics used against Theresa May to, quote, paralyse lawmaking. Elsewhere, plans to raise the legal smoking age to 21 and slap new taxes on tobacco companies could be unveiled on Thursday. The Eye also leads with Johnson facing a Tory rebel war of attrition, with the PM set to face daily attacks from backbench rebels. Oh, how ridiculous. It also reports former Chancellor Philip Hammond calling on the PM to resign. Again, no surprise there. Daily Express splashes on Boris going on a tax blitz to silence Tory rebels who want to oust him. That's more like it. He wants to, quote, draw a line under the confidence drama by wean voters and colleagues with new policies. The Independent says the PM has been warned his, quote, strongman act is in a confrontation with Brussels over the Northern Ireland Protocol will backfire with MPs. One former minister told the newspaper that an expected lurch to the right by Boris will be his, quote, red meat offering to MPs who are demanding tax cuts and a tough line on Brexit in exchange for their support. The Times reports that Boris Johnson is under pressure from his own cabinet to cut taxes this year if he wants to survive as PM. And the RMT union have announced the biggest rail strike for 30 years, with a week of disruption scheduled to take place at the end of the month. The Daily Mail warns how the rail union strike will paralyse Britain across 3 days later this month, describing the walkout as the biggest of its kind since 1989. The paper tells how around 50,000 workers are planning midsummer misery, and Labour aren't condemning it. Shame on them. The Daily Mail also reports on union chaos and strikes, asking, can't someone sort this out? Air travellers are also facing a summer of disruption, with hundreds of flights continuing to be axed. And the Daily Star leads with a Saturday night thunder fever, referring to the storms of up to 45 miles per hour set to hit the UK this week. Oh my goodness, I didn't know about this. Didn't know about it. And in a double whammy, hay fever sufferers should grab the tissues as so-called super pollen is set to hit millions of Brits. My superstar panel back now: former editor, current columnist at the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, the Conservative commentator, Calvin Robinson, and the author and journalist, Rebecca Reid. Now, concern for the future of women's sport is mounting after 2 male-born trans athletes dominated a recent female cycling event. This image of the Thunder Crit final podium sparked outrage as the tournament's best-performing biological woman, Jo Smith, could only muster 3rd place, while trans women Lily Chant and race winner Emily Bridges trounced the rest of the field. The event was independent of the British cycling authorities, who controversially banned Bridges from a women's race in March after she had won a men's-only event the month before. Among the many critics was tennis legend Martina Navratilova, who said, "This is where we are heading unless people wake up." And this latest controversy comes as Keir Starmer moved to rectify this PR disaster from March, in which he refused to state if a woman has a penis.
A woman can have a penis.
Nick, I don't think we can conduct this debate with,
Sorry, have I offended you in some way?
No, it's just... I just...
So, did Slippery Starmer finally clear it all up and commit to defining a woman? Of course not.
The vast majority of women, this is all about biology, and of course they don't have a penis. We all know that. 99.9% probably of women, it's all biology. We must support them, safe spaces, more women's equality, but let's not pretend or disparage or fail to support a small group of people who actually struggle with their gender identity.
Welsh First Minister Mark Drakeford has fallen victim today too. Watch.
So, First Minister, can you do something that not many other Labour politicians have failed to do so far, which is define a woman?
Well, Llywydd, my starting point is the same as Penny Mordaunt, the UK minister responsible at the time, who said that the UK government's starting point was that transgender women are women.
Rebecca Reid, your take on this?
Look, I think it's become this horrid sort of gotcha journalism that what you do is you get a politician in front of you and say, do women have penises?
Well, do they?
I mean, intersex women do sometimes have penises. That's certainly true. Trans women can have penises. Cis women don't have penises?
What's a cis woman?
Dawn, you don't like...
Do I want to be called a cis woman? Not really.
Woman.
I
don't have a penis. None of us do.
Feel the same. Well, apart from... but intersex women do. I mean, intersex women are very, very rare, but they do have penises, so that would be a thing to include. I think the major thing is this exemplifies the Labour problem, right? It's partially a party for blue-haired vegans, and it's partially a party for miners. And those two people feel differently about this conversation. A working-class mining person usually thinks that women don't have penises. A blue-haired vegan usually thinks that women can have penises. And one party...
And you think a woman can have a penis?
I don't know. I really don't. See, there's a mean question to ask someone.
It's not.
Because if I say it...
Women don't have penises. There you go. I said it.
It's not mean. It's not a gotcha.
Very simple.
And when we see people like Keir Starmer stuttering, it's because he knows the
biology.
truth and he feels like he has to lie. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's about reality versus fantasy. A woman is an adult human female. A woman does not have a penis. It's as simple as that. If people can't admit that, they should not get our votes.
Apart from intersex women.
Intersexes are
Very
normally,
rare,
but like
but
every
true.
rule, there are exceptions and outliers that prove the rule.
Yeah.
What about the sports event, Rebecca? Because if we just take a look at that photo again, I mean...
Yeah, it's not easy to look at.
It's disturbing, isn't it? Because that poor biological woman competing against two biologically born males didn't have a hope.
I think the difficult thing is I can't imagine that anybody likes cycling enough to medically transition to win more cycling races.
Yeah, but I'm not accusing
Surely
them
that
of
can't be happening,
but
right?
The thing is, I'm not even making that accusation. You know, Emily Bridges has given an interview today. It sounds like she's had a very difficult life. You know, Leah Thomas, very difficult life. You know, I'm not someone who's wanted to turn on men.
But should a biological woman who's trained her whole life to swim faster so she can get a college... But the problem in America is that you get college scholarships for swimming or for sports, which means you don't get to go to university. So if it is a race like that where it's a bit annoying if you don't win, that is different stakes from not getting a university scholarship. And that I do look at and go, oh, the person who doesn't...
I just don't think that anyone born as a man should compete in any sporting event that isn't against other males.
No.
Full stop, end of story.
At the start of this trans debate a few years ago, they said that gender and sex are two very different things, and a trans man is a woman who wants to live their life as a man, and a trans woman is the opposite. So we're not saying that they can change sex, they're saying they can change gender. That's important because these sports are male sports or female sports. Women... females have a higher pain threshold.
Sport has to be defined by sex.
Exactly, because females have a higher pain threshold. Females tend to be better at multitasking. Females tend to have higher life expectancies. Males tend to be physically stronger and more athletic. These are faster, and these are generalisations, but there are physical differences between males and females, between men and women.
There are, and I think anybody who tries to say that aren't is very disingenuous.
Women's sport is under threat because of this woke.
Women are under threat.
But the only thing I would say is how often are people having this row because they actually care about women's sports? Like, are these the same people who are campaigning for better coverage of women's football?
I'm sorry, Martina
or is it just... No, she does.
And Sharon Davies.
Yes, they do.
Absolutely.
100% they do.
And by the way, I am too, because my London Pulse netball team made the semi-finals, by the way, for the first time ever. And I'm a big, huge believer and supporter of women's sport.
And I'm a female cyclist, by the way.
So you guys actually care about sports, so I feel like it's not disingenuous when you talk about it.
No,
Some
a lot of
people
care
do
about
use it as a stick to beat trans people with.
No, it's no secret that Hollywood loves to stereotype, but one trope that the capital of cinema has relied on for generations is that of the great British villain. In the words of the British film critic Barry Norman, when Hollywood wants someone to play the bad guy, it casts a Brit. But some people know exactly what Harry Potter wokester Daniel Radcliffe, you know, the bloke who refused to back J.K. Rowling, who launched his whole career, they know what he was getting at when he accepted the MTV Movie and TV Award for Best Evil Villain for his role as Abigail Fairfax in the action comedy The Lost City. Look.
If we're being honest, though, the thing that makes my job easiest is just being English. This is the universally recognised accent of pure evil. This is a voice that would kick a puppy or not give Oliver Twist more food. So, yeah, I really should thank my parents the most for just having the foresight all those years ago to have me be British so that I could grow up sounding naturally evil enough to one day win this award. So thank you, Mum and Dad.
So was that another example of the woke left being ashamed of being British, as some have suggested? You can be the judge of that. Rebecca Reid, Calvin Robinson, Dawn Neeson, do stand by, because coming up, it's Jeremy Hunt versus the Jubilee line in tonight's Greatest Britain Union Jackass. But first, should we be more worried about the globalist agendas of the World Health Organization and the World Economic Forum? Well, Rebel News guerrilla journalist Avi Yemini has been helping take those entities to task. He's here in mere seconds, right after we take a look at what's coming up in tomorrow's show.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, is the UK's justice system too woke? Reclaim leader and actor Lawrence Fox and executive chairman Harry Miller unveiled their action plan to bring more legal power to the people. Plus, US superstar journalist Megyn Kelly and columnist extraordinaire Rod Little sound off on the issues impacting your world. And I'll break down the headlines of the day with my superstar panel. Daily Mail columnist Amanda Platel, entrepreneur and activist Adam Brooks, and broadcaster Ashley James. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
But it's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where the world's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. After watching Western nations turn into authoritarian hellscapes during COVID, I've been absolutely disgusted by the idea of the World Health Organization, which mishandled the pandemic from day one, forcing us into a global health treaty that completely removes our autonomy. Luckily, I'm not the only one leading the fight back. After taking an unconventional route into journalism, Avi Yemini isn't one to conform to the narrative pushed by the elite. So, born in Melbourne, Australia, Avi became homeless at the age of just 13. He then moved to Israel and gained citizenship there before becoming a sharpshooter with the Israeli Defence Force. Upon moving back to Australia, he eventually began working as a political activist and commentator, earning the role of chief correspondent in Australia for Rebel News, an online news platform that has gained a massive global following. And last month, he went viral after travelling to Davos, Switzerland for the World Economic Forum, where he interrogated global leaders, including a special envoy on COVID for the World Health Organization, David Nabarro. Look.
Rebel News, why do you think people don't trust? It's been hard to maintain trust through COVID.
Because COVID's affected poor people everywhere really badly.
So why do so many people blame your organisation, the WHO?
People like to find somebody to blame. I am not giving the WHO official position. Gosh, you're an aggressive interviewer. By the way, the pandemic's not finished. It's still going on.
So those words will scare people because they're thinking we're just getting back to life, and you're telling us from the WHO it's not over.
And Avi Yemini joins me live from Melbourne, Australia now. So, Avi, you had a very interesting time in Davos. Why did you feel it was important to scrutinise these elites who are running organisations like the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization?
Well, I guess, firstly, thanks for having me. It wasn't my idea. Ezra, our boss at Rebel, knew it was the news. It was his plan, and I think his gut instinct was spot on. Basically, we got there and you could see that the most powerful people in the world had their own little safe space there in Davos, Switzerland, where they were so shocked when any sort of reporter asked them a real question, just like Nabarro there.
Yeah, and you were also approaching, for example, senior executives at media organisations like the New York Times as well, right? And they didn't want to speak to you.
Well, in fact, I think it was more their handlers that realised that they probably shouldn't speak to me. That they seemed to be shocked that somebody was asking a question, and they tried to engage. But I also spoke to, powerful people, part of the UN. I think your viewers, there's a bunch of different ones. I spoke to the New York Times chief editor, who was there as a guest, not really asking the questions that they're supposed to be doing. I think your viewers can take a look at all of those at wefreports.com, not just from me. There was a whole team of 6 of us from Rebel News that came, and it was unbelievable. I dare suggest that next time there may be different protocols in Davos, because we did infiltrate their little safe space, like I said.
Well, indeed, and that's what's so fascinating about this, because it is a safe space, isn't it, where these shadowy organisations that contain lots of global elite, they don't expect to be asked a tough question. As you say, the New York Times, they're not there to do journalism and actually work out what's this treaty about, what have these organisations done wrong. They're there as part of the group. It's quite astonishing.
It's really astonishing. And when you go there, you see that they're all wearing name tags, and it's like a class system where it's color-coded. That's what made my job as a journalist really easy. And I'm surprised no other journalists did it, because they color-code, so it tells you straight away by the color how important this person is. Then they have their name and what company or organization they're a part of, or what country they're a minister of, or whatever it is. And so they give you all the information. It's essentially the only part in their entire thing that what they practice is what they preach, as in they do want to live in a class system. They do it well, and it really helped us to identify who they are, and then pose those really simple questions. People call them tough questions. They're not tough questions. They're what the everyday, ordinary Aussie or Brit would be asking him. Nabarro, you know, I kind of, at the end of it, felt bad for Nabarro. What you don't see on camera at the end of that 8-minute interaction is that he was so shocked. He turned to, once the camera went off, he turned to my cameraman and tried to guilt trip him. But I feel like watching it, it came from a sincere place. He was so thrown off that somebody, what he called, ambushed him, and everybody can watch the full 8 minutes. It's, you know, I wouldn't call that an ambush. I would call that journalism. Like I said, WEFreports.com, the whole thing's up there. And he genuinely was shaking and said to my cameraman, I hope you feel good about your ambush journalism. And I'm just looking at it, and I promised him that I would give him a chance for a proper sit-down interview, because he was saying that was the problem, that I ambushed him on the street in his safe space. I gave him more than a day. I said I would give him a day. I gave him almost a week. In fact, we traveled all the way to Geneva, to the World Health Organization's assembly, where they were, you know, trying to get this treaty that you were mentioned signed by all the nations. But I never heard
of course
back.
You did.
So that's why it's so
important. This is the point, Avi, and that's why I think what you did is so important, because of course they won't sit down with Rebel News. But by the way, none of these jokers will come on my show either, or on Mark Stein's show here on GBNews. They're only going to go to media organisations where they know they're going to get an easy ride, because many of these media organisations buy into the globalist agenda. And I think one thing that's really disturbing, Avi, is that these organisations, they are so focused on domestic politics, aren't they? I mean, look at what's going on in the UK, for example. At the moment, we've had a leadership challenge. It's all about personality. You've just had a big election and a regime change in Australia too. So they're so focused on their domestic governments and domestic politics. Very often, these news organisations are completely missing the fact that the World Health Organization, the United Nations, the World Economic Forum have increasing control over our lives.
Absolutely, and it's even worse than that. The journalists and the organisations that actually make their way to places like Davos are there, like we said, like the New York Times editor that I confronted. They're there on invite, and they want that little class, you know, the white one, which means that they're really important. They want that. And they want to be invited back next year with the same one. So they're never going to ask a question that could rock the boat. And you see also just walking around Davos, they're advertising to these people, to these organizations. They're selling their product. And that's what they have. It's a product. They are owned by the corporations, by the governments, by those elites. They're part of that little elite group. And that's why, you know, in the days of the internet, in this time, it's so crucial that citizen journalists and alternative media like Rebel News is so important, I believe.
No, indeed. I think it's so important. I really liked what you did out there, and I did watch the full 8-minute confrontation with David Nabarro from the World Health Organization. I thought you were completely respectful. You were asking very good questions, and as you say, it's well worth a watch. So thank you so much for being with us tonight. That's the Chief Correspondent for Rebel News Australia, Avi Yemini. But it's time now to reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. My superstar panel return. Dawn Neeson, your Greatest Britain, please.
4-year-old artist from Yorkshire. She did an incredibly poignant sketch of the Queen holding Paddington's hand, followed by a corgi walking off into the sunset to celebrate the end of the Jubilee.
Oh, there it is. Lovely. Lovely stuff. Calvin Robinson, your nominee.
Lee Anderson MP.
Oh, and we've got to look at why. We've got to look at why. Come on, let's enjoy this.
He's a man who's lied to the Queen, lied to the House of Commons, lied to the public, and they don't trust him
what people
anymore.
see, Geeta, is a witch hunt led by the BBC, led by the Labour Party and the mainstream.
Well,
Listen to me.
It was a slam dunk moment. Lee Anderson going for the BBC, live on the BBC. Love it. Rebecca Reid, your Greatest Britain nominee.
It's Theresa May, who I've always had a soft spot for, because she seems like the kind of person who had a lot of pens at school. Because she apparently, allegedly, turned up to the no confidence vote in a ball gown. And they say maybe she was on her way from an event,
Something
but I
like that,
think
right.
it was a message.
Well, look, of course, today's Greatest Britain is Lee Anderson. It was a sensational moment on the BBC this morning. Also a sensational debate on the show tonight between Lee versus Nina Mishkov. I hope you had your popcorn for that one. My goodness. Uni and Jackass time now. Dawn Neeson, your nominee.
Jeremy Hunt, always Jeremy Hunt. and where do we even start with the reasons? I'm not going to give you them, but this week in particular, for thinking that China had the right attitude to dealing with COVID people. I mean, it's just really...
Calvin Robinson, your Uni and Jackass nominee.
RMT for the tube strikes. These unions hold too much power, grinding the capital to a halt.
And now it's going to be the trains too, Calvin.
Well, indeed, at a time when we need economic growth. It's outrageous.
And Rebecca Reid, your Uni and Jackass nominee.
So for me, it's Meghan and Harry. But
you're the woke one.
No, this is very specific because they released the first photo of Lilibet and she's wearing a headband.
What's wrong with that?
Two things. A, they're really uncomfortable. B, there are cases of children being strangled by them. And C, they're a little bit tacky.
That's the lamest reason, but...
I'm sorry, it bothers me. It's one of my most deeply held opinions. There is no place for headbands on babies.
And you usually love her, it has to be said.
I don't, particularly not post-headband.
That's it. But look, I'm going to go with Dawn Neeson on this.
What?
Yeah, quite right.
But the headband, Dan.
Absolutely. Today's Union Jackass, because it is so disturbing the way he is trying to worm his way back into the Tory party because he's backed by the elite. He's a Ramona. He wanted to lock us all down, and not just lock us all down, by the way, forcibly remove Brits from their home to lock us up in government facilities if we tested positive for COVID. He sounds like he should be running the Chinese Communist Party, not the British economy. I draw a line at Jeremy Hunt. No way. Dawn Neeson, Calvin Robinson, Rebecca Reid, my superstar panel. Thank you so much for being here. Of course, I'm back again tomorrow night from 9 p.m. I hope you do join us then. Headliners is up now, though, so don't go to bed just yet. Good night.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Rain overnight will be followed by showers on Wednesday, but always staying fine in the far north of Scotland. That's where a ridge of high pressure keeps things settled, but elsewhere, a lot of low pressure lurking nearby. One system pushing in through the evening, bringing spells of rain, initially to the southwest, then into Wales, central southern England, Northern Ireland. And for the rest of England, actually the weather turns even wetter overnight with some heavy and persistent rain, particularly for southern Scotland, Northern England and parts of the southeast. Behind that, showers follow the rain for Wales and the southwest, and it's a mild night to come for many, 13 to 14 Celsius. But for the far north of Scotland, a cool start to Wednesday because the rain doesn't quite